Hey guys, I wanted to make a video today about my latest painting, Casimir the Villain, and a lot of people have been asking me lots of questions about it, and I wanted to answer some of them here for you guys exclusively. So, one of the biggest questions that I had was edge control or detail control. How did you know when to detail what and when to taper the detail into the edges? Whenever you're doing any kind of portrait at all, that's when you know you have to start tapering the edges and making sure that the edges aren't as detailed, the edges of the canvas aren't as detailed as the portrait itself. The biggest issue that I find with students is that they think that as long as you're rendering something, as long as it's detailing and it's inside the window of the canvas, you'll improve and your painting will look good. This is the biggest misconception. It is not true that this happens because when we do over detail, we confuse the focus. And a good painting has good focus. The composition all spirals towards the portrait. If it's a portrait painting, that's what should be the most detailed. So every time I detailed one of these pieces here, I always made sure to reference back toward the portrait. So if I was going at 1 pixel width for some of the wispy hairs, because I didn't paint the whole body of the hair with single wisps of hair because this is the biggest thing that I'm always campaigning against. What I did was I painted the body of hair of the beard as really basic shades, and then I added the wisps on top to make his beard feel old and dry. And I knew that if I was going to shrink this small a brush for this character and have it this concentrated in this condensed detail in the portrait, I knew that everywhere else had to drop a level. So as you can see, as things taper away from him, we have less kind of like a confusion of detail because I do use single width for the glass because it's glass, it's supposed to be represented as delicate. I use single width brush, like single pixel width brush for the writing in the back, but other than if anything is too far away from him, I don't have any of that. The top is pretty empty because it's a cavern. I wanted to make it feel like claustrophobic. But right over here, very, very minimal detail, very minimal detail. 1 or 2 lines, where over here I have hundreds of lines all over his face. Not lines, really, just brushstrokes to represent the hair, the lines of the hair. Another question that was asked was how I made the glass look like glass. What's the biggest problem, I think, with some people is that they think like they can just go into a painting, into a masterpiece, and just start drawing whatever the masterpiece is demanding. So here I demanded a lot of vials of potions and magic and alchemy or whatever it is that he does. And I knew that I could not pull this off if I didn't pick up a reference because unless you've done enough studies of the behavior of that specific texture. So if you've done studies that cover the terraforming in rocks, if you've done studies that cover basic woodwork, if you've done studies covering basic folds and fabric and drapery, and you've done lots of those, and those are behind you, at that point you have the right to go into your painting and paint freehand. But if you haven't done enough studies on the texture behavior of any of those things, you cannot go into the painting freehand. You'll be, excuse the term, dicking around the whole time. You will not be, you won't know what you're doing. At that point, you will be studying. If you're at a point where you find yourself you're in a steady state in a masterpiece, that's really bad overlap of different mentalities. In a masterpiece, you are using your skill to bring something to life. You're creating. You shouldn't be studying on the most expensive piece of marble that you have. You should not be using that to study. You use clay or some other less intensive, less expensive material to do the basic studies. You don't use your most expensive material. Same exact thing here, the metaphor transfers. When you're working on a reference, when you're working on a masterpiece, you have to use some references, and you have to make sure that that's not the first time you drew glass. That's not the first time you drew hair. That's not the first time you drew a face. So it's like using the most expensive material to do a basic study. Some other critiques that I have for myself, the hand is completely. I only noticed after it passed the scan and it passed the navigator. This further had his right hand, and it passed the figure drawing kind of stage where I was just sketching, but it did not pass once I rendered. And that is one of the things that I always talk about to my students. Make sure that you're reviewing and you're planning everything, meaning that you're making sure that everything is proportionate and logical, because once you render, the rendering will reveal all kinds of mistakes because it will not have made sense. Somehow, some way, things start to look disproportionate. I have so many things that I could fix about this painting, but usually when I leave a painting behind, I just leave it behind. I really don't spend too much time on it. Another one of the paintings that I would definitely go back to editing is the Blue Witch. The contrast is so low, and I feel like I could have really changed a lot. Just has to load. Give me a second. There we go. The contrast is really low. The canvas cuts off at the top part. The canvas itself feels so claustrophobic. I could have given her more space around her. So this might be something I usually don't like revisiting my paintings, especially because I'm just done with them and then that's it. But I feel like this one should be revisited. I ran out of patience and I was too impatient and I really wanted to post it and I wanted to get it done by the time Patreon was up. As you can see, I have excessive detail near the edge of the canvas, which is not a good idea. What I have to do either is leave this where it is and then go back up to the face and over detail the face as I need to, and then fix the hair, fix the contrast, really bring her out from her background. These are all going to be portfolio pieces for me, and they represent me as uh, the brand, whatever I am. So it's really important that I make sure I represent myself with my latest skill level. And that's why it's so important to do studies so that your latest skill level isn't a study. You're not using studies to represent your latest skill level. That was just a shot, a single frame in the animation of your art journey. You can't expect your studies to represent you in a masterpiece. That's why making sure that you have a good amount of references to back you up uh, maximizes the skill that's being represented. And finally when you do a masterpiece. Not every piece I do is a masterpiece. I make as many mistakes as you guys. I probably should avoid masterpieces for the next couple months and just refocus back to my form studies, back to better anatomy studies, back to full figure drawings. I don't do those enough. Maybe more material studies. I did have a couple of like a challenge with the glass. The glass I got away with it because I kind of just guessed my way around while looking at a reference. I couldn't find any decent references, so that's why they all seem to look like the same kind of glass. Um, and I need to do a little bit more studies on just how to put together a canvas, what to fit into the canvas, how to set up a landscape, an interior landscape. That's definitely something I need to study soon. So I've attached the PSDs for both Blue Witch and Casimir to the package today. So thank you everyone for believing in me and supporting me. You guys are the best. You keep me going. Thank you so much, guys. See you next month. Bye bye.